Hi, I'm Tiffany Yu, and welcome to the Pioneers Podcast. I'm a social entrepreneur and disability advocate who spends my work and life destigmatizing disability, trauma, and grief. You can often find me sharing stories on disability and identity, side hustles on entrepreneurship, leading with vulnerability, and more. Along the way, I've met some incredible people who have created space for me and for us to explore what it means to be human. And I want to share those conversations with you. You can find me across social media at I'm Tiffany Yu. That's the letter I, the letter M, followed by my first and last name. Now let's get today's show started. Hi everyone, it's Tiffany, and I wanted to say thank you for joining me in my first foray into podcasting. You're about to listen to my first episode, which is a conversation with Gina Moffa, who's a psychotherapist in New York City. One of the great things about learning something new is that you learn lessons, hard lessons, after the fact, and then change and pivot course as needed. So the audio quality on our conversation is not where I would like it to be, but given the timeliness of our conversation and my desire to share her expertise, I wanted to share our conversation with you with the audio as is. I hope that you're still able to get the messages shared, and I am excited for you to listen and learn. Hi everyone, it's your host Tiffany here, and I am excited to introduce our first guest. She's a psychotherapist from New York City and an old friend of mine, Gina Moffa.
Hi, Tiff. How are you? I'm so happy to be here with you.
I'm excited that you're here. So a little bit of backstory. So Gina and I met back in 2012 at a retreat in Vermont and managed to stay in touch over the years. And, you know, she is just joining me on this experiment of podcasting.
I couldn't be more honored. You're one of my heroes.
The feeling is so mutual. So just kind of wanted to dive right in. I thought that having you on as a guest was extremely timely given everything that's happening right now with COVID-19. How are things in New York City?
Things here are progressing in terms of more cases being confirmed, and we're over 15,000 here. We are, as of today, which is Sunday, March 22nd, we're on a not shelter in place, but mandatory work from home, except for essential employees. Although I have to say, just looking at pictures and being outside myself, a lot of people are having a hard time taking this seriously, which is concerning.
Yeah, I'm getting that sentiment as well. I feel like here in California, and I'm in San Francisco, most of us are taking it pretty seriously. I think being the second state to have COVID-19 cases reported. But one of the things I'm kind of noticing from my general community is this general sentiment around everyone's just feeling really stressed and anxious and overwhelmed. I think given your work and the conversations that you're having, are you noticing that as well?
Absolutely. I mean, like you've heard probably all over the place, this is an unprecedented time in our entire world. Having nobody ever tested or enduring COVID-19, there's no rule book for it. So when you are confused, you look to your leadership, and your leadership really is doing it moment by moment along with you and figuring it out. So it definitely increases the level of anxiety. And, I think in general, this is a time of real pendulum swinging for people. We find ourselves swinging to the extreme from being fine and okay 1 minute, so maybe calm and rational, and then back to fearing for our survival and being in total panic mode. So I don't know if you're experiencing this, but a lot of people are responding this because of being in a constant state of fear and the unknown.
Yeah, and I think when so many of us are used to just controlling so many aspects of our environment, there's just so much uncertainty right now. It's actually forcing me, and I feel like during this time I've been learning a lot of lessons around really trying to understand what this word surrender, or what I want it to mean in my life. And I think just relinquishing some of that control and trusting that whatever is happening right now is meant to teach us something in the long term, kind of just sitting in that place. One of the things that I've really appreciated that you've been doing is on social media, and I think it's through Facebook and Instagram. And we can plug those at the end, but you've been providing some tips over the last couple of days around how to really manage those feelings of stress and anxiety. And one of the things that you had chatted about was really around grief. And as someone who, I lost my father as a child, and over the past couple of months, I've been participating in these grief dinners for other people who have lost parents. I did a quick check-in with our group, and a lot of us are really finding this time to be a little bit triggering, right? Because we're in this period of social distancing. And I think, social distancing can sometimes mean social isolation for people. And especially for those of us who are grieving and thinking about what our support system looked like during those times of needing support and not being sure where to turn, I think is what I'm finding to be a little bit triggering during this time.
So there's a couple of things there. First, let's talk about the experience of grief itself. When a person is experiencing grief, that is a trauma to their body. And because of that, your body and your emotions, or actually your body itself, decreases in the ability to actually control how you're feeling. So, when you're experiencing grief or you're being triggered by all of this, just remember that there's a dysregulation in your body's ability to regulate its own emotions. So you are going to feel really out of control. You're going to feel really vulnerable. And you're going to feel really susceptible to sort of any emotional, physical, or sensory cue that would remind you of the grief, that would remind you of the feeling, which is mostly helplessness. What I would say first and foremost is to really be mindful about your exposure to the news. And something I'm talking with my clients about is really asking them, when you're looking at the news, what is it that you're looking for? What information is it that you're seeking? Is it something that, are you looking for control? It's really important to know, because in a lot of ways, anxiety is not a choice, but in some ways it is. So when I say be mindful about your exposure, you do have the option to turn off the news and get get whatever news you may need or information you may need in a different way. I don't know about San Francisco, but here in New York City, we have a text message that we could do 692-692, and we get all of the up-to-date information straight from the governor's office. So we don't need any of the intermediary of the news at all. And even really, I would say, Tiff, like being mindful about who you're talking to. Are you more anxious when you talk to a specific person? Are you more anxious after talking to somebody? Are you more anxious when you're sitting alone in silence? I mean, one of the things that's the most powerful tool is to know what's triggering you and have some sort of control, or at least some kind of semblance of control in what you can be doing and how you can control the things in your immediate surroundings. If that makes any sense.
Yeah. And I guess I will say, so for those of us who are in San Francisco, you can text 888-777 and text them all capital letters, no spaces, COVID-19 SF, and you'll be getting alerts from the city and county of San Francisco related to COVID-19. But I think, to your point, I actually do think limiting media use is very helpful. For me, it's been really kind of depending on those text messages and really only looking at things from the CDC and the World Health Organization. But I think what is making it a little bit hard is, on the one hand, I'm very grateful to be part of a lot of global communities that have these 150 member WhatsApp groups. As a result, a lot of people, want to inform people or spread positivity, which I think is great. But on the downside, it just means I'm continuously being inundated with messages. And you and I chatted a little bit about this. I just feel kind of social overwhelm in a way of like all these people wanting to do these Zoom check-in calls or dance parties. And so for me, it's just picking and choosing what I think is going to be the best thing for me at the time. And maybe it's not joining any of those calls. As an introvert, I think I get most of my energy from being on my own. So I think really being able to check in with myself about what's going on. But I also think, to your point, this isn't really, the grief can really happen if you've experienced any type of loss. And I think in one of your videos, you had mentioned that a lot of people are experiencing grief right now in terms of social distancing and not being able to have that human connection or that human touch.
Oh, absolutely. The grief of human affection can really be something that comes as a surprise to some people. People may feel like they just don't know what's going on, but to have that touch, it's calming, it's soothing, and it's also a really strong message to your brain and the vagus nerve in your brain that all is okay on the Western Front, so to speak. And I know, I mean, I have this video out there, but if any of your listeners actually want to try any of this, Peter Levine is somebody who I worked with many, many years ago, and he has a lot of techniques that are self-soothing in the face of real trauma. And this is the fight or flight kind of trauma, which I feel like we are in at times here. But really what we want to do is just try to get that part of our brain in the place where it doesn't have to react so much. It can actually just be and feel what it feels, and somehow it lets it go. So let me know if sort of at the end you want to do any of these exercises.
Yeah, if you want to provide kind of like one or two strategies that you think might be helpful. I know that the videos were helpful to see the visual, but if there's a way to kind of explain it for our listeners, we can do that.
Yeah, I mean, let's start with something pretty that works with, since we're talking about Peter Levine, let's get into a space of kind of just feeling centered if we can. So if you can, just close your eyes and put one hand on your forehead and one hand on your heart. The purpose of this particular exercise is really to feel a shift in your presence, just to notice what's going on between your hands, between your hand on your head and your hand on your heart. Sometimes it takes some time, so maybe your viewers want to actually stay this way for the remainder of our interview or do it again afterwards. But you want to stay this way for as long as you can until you feel a shift. You want to feel what goes on between the hands. And sometimes you may feel an energy flow. Maybe you feel a little change in your temperature. Maybe a feeling will come up. I just want to ask you to keep your hands there. It could be a few moments, maybe 5 to 10 minutes, really feeling it until you have some kind of shift go on. And even since we're here, I would say pay attention to the hand that's on your forehead right now. Feel the hand. What does it feel like? What does it feel like touching your head? Is it relaxed? Is it tense? Is it tingling? Is it warm? Feel what the hand feels when it's touching your forehead. Does the hand feel that your forehead feels hard or warm? What is it like for your hand to feel that forehead? It may sound silly, but really just simply being with your body, resting your focus on this for a while can really calm down so much of both the heartbeat, which is also connected to the vagus nerve in your head, which is telling your body to fight, flight, or freeze. I want you to feel what the second hand on your heart feels. Is your hand on your heart heavy, tense, relaxed? Is it cool on top or warm? What does it sense when it's on your heart? I just want to know what sensations are there. Is there tension? Is it starting to relax? You may even sense some emotions come up. Maybe you'll see colors behind your eyes, shapes, little textures. Maybe you feel foggy. So what does the chest feel like when the hand is sitting on top of it? Does it just feel the pressure in that area? Some weight? Does it feel warm? I just want to sit with that for a while and just really just be with the heart for a while. And I really just want to know if there's any difference sensing the part of your body that's doing the touching versus the parts of the body that are receiving that touch. Are there any differences between the hand and your heart? When you're done with this, I'd like you to keep your hand on your forehead, but also place the hand that's on your heart on your belly. Again, pay attention to what's going on inside of your body. Does your stomach hurt? Does it feel distended? Does it feel like there's nervous tension inside of there? Just want to really just be there with your body. Your stomach is your second brain, so we want to sort of see what's going on with it and try to calm it if we can, but I would just stay this way until there's some sort of shift, till there's some sort of flow. I do this with clients if they're unable to sleep or feel afraid. We sort of practice it in session. If they're having nightmares, this really does help keep people present and centered. Obviously, we're doing this over a podcast right now, but if you were in front of me and we had the time and the space, it would be good to stay here for as long as possible with some soft music on. So if you're at home, maybe pause the podcast or do this a little bit later, but it's really important that you take a step to nurture yourself and soothe any feelings that are coming up that are related to trauma, grief, anxiety, and really just try to pay attention to taking really good care of your body at this time. And if you want to come back to the room again, try to center ourselves. So go ahead and just kind of bring in another grounding tip that I do. So Tiff, if your eyes are closed, sort of open them and let's get our senses back going. Try to tell me 3 things that you see around you, right? It could be a pen, it could be your computer, it could be anything in your surroundings.
I see my pen and my notebook and my computer.
Okay. Are there 4 things you can touch around you? 4 other things.
I can touch my phone tripod and a blanket that I have wrapped around me, and a napkin that's on my dining table.
Okay.
And the placemat that is underneath it.
Perfect. Now tell me 3 things outside of me that you hear. Could be any kind of external sound. You can even an internal sound like your stomach growling or something like mine is right now.
I hear the buzz of my refrigerator. And I do hear a little bit of white noise, I think probably from our recording being across the country and doing this. And I think I hear the second hand on a clock.
Good hearing.
Is that your clock?
No, it is my clock.
Oh.
I'm like, wow, I'm sitting right next to it. You hear my clock across the country. So let's keep this going because it's really good for the people around you too, which is acknowledge 2 things you can smell. It could be maybe you're in your office and you can smell the pen, ink, or...
I just smell the air in my apartment. There's like no smell. It smells like kind of cool, like when I breathe in through my nose. I can feel the coolness.
Okay.
And then I guess the scent of my clothes that have been in the laundry.
Oh.
So the laundry detergent.
It's a great smell. And the last one is acknowledge 1 thing you can taste. And I know you're talking to me right now, so it could be even just the inside of your mouth for now.
I had orange juice this morning.
Well, here we are. So thank you for bearing with me on that. I think, sometimes when we go into a place that can feel meditative, feelings come up. Sometimes strong feelings can come up, and they can also bring up outside of calm, but more anxiety. So, these are 5 grounding techniques that I think can really be helpful just to use the senses to bring you back to, what's in front of you, but also just keep you incredibly present.
Yeah, that was beautiful. Thank you for sharing. I think we're going to take a small break right here. And when we come back, we will chat some more.
Thank you. It's so fun.
Voting isn't just going to the polls on election day anymore. Options like early voting, mail-in voting, and ballot drop boxes are available to more voters and are growing in popularity. How to Vote, a tool created by Democracy Works, breaks down the options your state offers for casting a ballot, empowering you to decide when and where to vote. How to Vote is easy to use and helps folks from all over the country overcome many of the process barriers to voting. Democracy Works is committed to helping you vote no matter what. Their tool, How to Vote, does just that. For example, you can sign up for election reminders, see what's on your ballot, get step-by-step assistance requesting your mail ballot, explore your options for returning your voted mail ballot, check your voter registration status, find your polling site, and make sure you have appropriate ID. Decide when and where you'll vote this year at howto.vote. Hi, it's Tiffany, and you're joining us with the psychotherapist from New York City, Gina Moffa. And if you're just joining us, we just had a wonderful mindfulness exercise to really soothe and nurture ourselves. So if you haven't had a chance to listen to that, rewind a little bit. Hey, Gina.
Hi, Tiffany.
So I wanted to chat. So in our prep call for this, I chatted a little bit around wanting to kind of explore self-care strategies or coping tips during this really uncertain time. And I think you had some thoughts around calling it self-care strategies. Wanted to hear a little bit more about how you're thinking about that.
What I really feel right now is that self-care has this reputation of feeling a little bit indulgent and self-indulgent and luxurious. Right now, the words matter. Everything that we're saying, everything that we're hearing, it all has its own weight. So in my mind, there does need to be more weight on the ways that we're taking care of ourselves. So I'm calling it survival care. And I think this is something that we have to be very purpose-driven for. And it's the normal stuff, like making sure we get good sleep, which a lot of people are not right now because of obviously anxiety, which is where I think calming methods and self-soothing and mindfulness can play a really good part. But beyond that, making sure that we're eating healthy foods in the midst of things being uncertain. How often are we getting fresh fruits and vegetables if we're hunkering down for 6 weeks? We're going to be eating more processed foods. And so in this way, it puts a lot of weight on making sure that our physical body is moving the energy and the anxiety and the trauma and the grief up and out of our bodies. And that could be through dancing, that could be through any kind of fitness exercising, taking a walk 6 feet apart from people. But really making sure also that we're mindful both about what we spoke about earlier in terms of our exposure to the news, who we're talking to, but also making sure that even though we're physically distancing right now, that we're not on social overdrive. I think you and I were both talking about how we seem busier and more connected than we did before this, and we're all very separate. So I think taking time for ourselves, whether it's a bath, whether it's reading, whether it's journaling, whether it's dancing alone in our living room, that kind of thing is going to be incredibly important. So I guess to say that it's not frivolous. This is all stuff that we really need to do to stay connected to our own well-being. And so I would really say, first and foremost, to make sure that your physical health is something you're up to date on. Do you have all the things that you need to stay physically healthy? Check off the box. But after that, our mental well-being and our mental health goes hand in hand with physical health. So when I say purpose-driven, there's a lot of emphasis behind that. Survival care in a time of uncertainty is completely vital at this time.
For sure. Yeah. And if I think about, and I've given talks about self-care strategies when they are more relevant, especially in the workplace. And I think especially an extremely digitally connected world outside of this social distancing and pandemic that we're in. But one of the things is really focusing on the fact that your overall well-being is a combination of your physical health, your mental health, and your social health.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people kind of forget this like social health component of making sure that social distancing doesn't mean social isolation,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so you've talked about not over isolating, making sure that you're checking in with people. And one of the things that I've actually found most rewarding in this whole thing is, being able to pick up the phone and FaceTime someone, and more often than not, they pick up. And this could be someone that normally I'm very used to just texting them because that's the easiest thing for me to do. Or I haven't been in touch with them in a while. And, I think even just a check-in really, really means a lot. And a couple of days ago on my Instagram stories, I just recorded a quick video just asking people how they were doing today. And one of the responses was from someone I had never met before, but I think just needed support of feeling like someone was listening.
Mm.
And I think that these check-ins are more important now than ever.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's why I say if you're alone, making sure to not over isolate. There are older people out there. There are people who live alone. Those are the people we have to almost be in service to first, just a simple hello actually can do so much.
Yeah. I've been thinking a lot about community care, staying connected, being kind.
Mm-hmm.
And especially during times like this, when we're so stressed and we're really anxious, it can take us into a mindset of scarcity,
Mm-hmm.
right? And acting out because we're so afraid.
Absolutely. And we are humans, so we act out anyway. So people are going in a place of being vulnerable, in a place of being uncertain. We are at our worst as humans. So people act, it's a very primitive, humans, believe it or not, are very primitive when it comes to fear. We go way, way back in our history, and we sort of, that fight, flight, or freeze is very archaic with regard to our survival. So what we do is sort of the better thinking part of our brain goes to the back burner. And in fear, we can, vision, clarity, doing what's right and wrong, this sort of thing, it can be very clouded. So people can be more jerks than usual. But then people can also be, giving and compassionate and service oriented. And those are the people that have that contagious energy that we have to sort of look at more of. Remember when I said limit your exposure to people that trigger you, and that's sort of going into, definitely reach out to people. Let's not be alone, but we also have to be mindful about, to whom our energy goes. And so, because anxiety can be contagious, because all of this fear can be contagious, it is important that we have a group of people, or at least one person with whom we can say what's going on, but also be centered and, clear, and also have compassion from them so that we can be calm. I think going into a state of hysteria where everyone's like, can you believe it? Oh my God, there's another death here today. What next? Being informed is absolutely important, but being over-informed can be really detrimental to our mental health.
Mm-hmm. So we're only about a week in, at least from a San Francisco perspective, of our shelter in place. I know it's going to go on for at least another 2 weeks. I know longer in other places. Are you anticipating, what are you thinking we're going to be seeing over the next couple of weeks in terms of people's anxiety levels, how they're reacting to all of this?
I think that sometimes we're slow learners. I think, we're seeing right now people, if they feel good and they don't have any symptoms, they think that it's fine to go outside and do their normal thing. I think people are excited that they don't have to go to work, and it's been really good weather here in New York. So people have been more social and more out. Thankfully, Governor Cuomo shut down our restaurants and such, so people can't congregate too much. But I definitely see that when this becomes more real, so to speak, for people, You will see more people get tired of sort of doing the same thing every day, whether it's checking in with people, or you will see people's moods go down. You will see more depression and more sadness, and people feeling more isolated. The one thing I recently heard is if you text home to 741-741 when you're feeling depressed or sort of going through any kind of emotional crisis, there is a crisis worker who will text you back immediately and continue texting with you. So, and this is a free service for everybody. So again, it's texting home, HOME, to 741-741, and somebody will get back to you. I think that's a really, really critical information for people who are isolated, who may not necessarily want to share all of that with a friend to top it off.
Yeah, and I think to your point, so I would describe myself as introverted, and so this first week has been really exciting for me to launch new projects like this podcast and spend more time in my home and cleaning and tidying up. And so I'm really curious to see how I myself can continue to maintain this level of energy. And I don't know if I would call it contentment, but there's just been kind of like a burst of energy with all of these new measures that have been put in place around social distancing, around people wanting to connect, and dance parties happening and yoga classes happening. And my hope is that over the next couple of weeks, we don't lose that momentum, because I guess I am just a little bit worried that the isolation is going to start getting worse as time goes on. Mm-hmm. Right now, we're still kind of in the honeymoon phase.
We are. I totally agree. And I think a lot of people are using this as a time to be motivated to get projects done and all of that. But I also want to say it's really important to be a time to just be gentle, to go inward, to, to do really gentle activities with yourself and to be quieter. I definitely see the value in the dance parties and all of that and the connectedness for sure. But like I was saying with the pendulum swing, it will go back and forth, because I do think that, to say sort of indefinitely, we're not really sure. We don't have an exact day that this isolation or, quarantine or social distancing will end. I think that, some of that energy is bound to shift. And so, like I said earlier, thankfully, energy is contagious. And so, it will be a wave. And I think that it's okay if it's a wave. I don't want anybody feeling like just because they're home, they have to get specific things done. They have to feel productive. I don't want any FOMO when it comes to being, socially distanced. I think that can really come up too. There's a lot with humanity where people can just still feel isolated, even in the midst of connecting with people. So, the compare and despair does not end just because we're not all doing something. It's really important.
I love that message. Yeah, I love that message of being gentle with yourself. And I think that, and you probably might remember this, but I always like to have like an intention or a hashtag for my year. And for one of my years, it was live slow. And one of the things that when people have been checking in with me to see how I'm doing, one of the things I normally tell them is that I'm getting more used to this pace of moving slower. And I think that, at least in my life, there are just so many distractions that pull me in a lot of different directions. Mm-hmm. And by being at home, yesterday, I'm not sure I did anything other than wash the dishes.
And that was a lot.
And I've been closing every night with 6 minutes of gratitude journaling. And we can talk a little bit about routines, because I know that's a big part of kind of staying, kind of coping, and a survival strategy through this time. But for me to be able to close every day with the gratitude journal, and in my journal, I was like, I feel grateful that I've been eating at home. That gives me the chance to have dishes to do, because otherwise I'm going out and I'm eating out, or I'm traveling, or I don't have food at home. So it's also been kind of a reframing of being kinder and being slower and being gentler.
Mm-hmm. I love that. I really do. And I'm also giving my hand is on my heart for the people who are listening to this, who can't identify because they're so much in a place of anxiety and sadness that maybe all they can write in their journal is, I am not grateful for any of this. And I think to honor that and honor their hearts in this time too, to let them know that they're not alone, because sometimes gratitude is a really huge exercise for people who are stuck in a dark, sticky tar pit of depression. it's really hard to find that gratitude. But I think it's a practice. So I think we try a little bit at a time for sure. And I love your, what your example just was, because it's pretty simple, but it's profound at the same time.
Yeah, and I think I will acknowledge that for those of us who actually are able to be socially distant right now, there is a level of privilege embedded within that. And so I do want to acknowledge everyone who is working on the front lines, the people who aren't able, who are in essential roles right now, who are potentially exposing themselves every day in order to, keep whatever needs to be moving. So
Absolutely. That
yeah,
was one of my posts just 2 days ago, that we have a
yeah,
privilege of being alone.
yeah.
Who would have ever thought?
I mean, I will say in preparation for this podcast, I did look through I did look through a lot of your posts because I wanted to make sure that I was aware of what was out there and the great tips that you were sharing. But I thought so. We've chatted about limiting media usage. You've walked us through a really beautiful self-soothing exercise. You provided us tips around making sure that we're keeping our physical health in check by just moving our body, by doing something. We've talked about not over isolating, and I thought I'd close by talking about routines. And one piece of advice that I've gotten to help kind of manage this work from home scenario that many of us are in is to wake up and make sure that you change out of your pajamas.
Hmm.
Um, so I kind of wanted to hear what your thoughts are about routines during this time.
I totally agree with you that changing out of your pajamas, especially if you're going to work virtually, can really change. They say, what is that line, like dress to impress, but if you look good, you feel good. So some of that does take place, but I think everybody could have a different routine. I think if it could mean waking up and making your favorite cup of coffee. It could be waking up and looking out the window and saying a prayer for somebody. I can tell you a little bit about something that I've been doing, because you know me as a
Yeah.
singer as well as a therapist. And I've been finding a lot more how much melody and music is activating my brain in a more meditative way than ever before and calming me down. So I've been waking up and singing mantras. And, whether it's a little line like, all is well, whatever it is. And I actually, even if you don't mind me kind of taking a little sidebar on this, I somehow came upon a music therapist from Australia who sang this little number that I felt was so powerful, because music and melody is controlled breathing. So what it does is actually just like bring circulation and oxygen into your entire body, all of your brain, all of your organs, and really can wake you up. And I think it's also a really good way to start the morning. I'd love to sing it if you don't mind.
Yeah, no, please.
Okay. Every little cell in my body is happy. Every little cell in my body is well. Every little cell in my body is happy. Every little cell in my body is well. I'm so glad every little cell in my body is happy and well. I'm so glad every little cell in my body is happy and well. And I've been doing that sort of over and over.
So the applause coming
Oh
in.
Lord, it's a cute little song, but I think if you can really get into it, it's an interesting and tricky way to get your body to calm down, and maybe bring this into your personal routine in the morning, whether it's this song or any song that you really love. I would really say bringing melody into your routine would be, not just therapeutic, but it would be part of my survival care
Yeah,
way of
and
being.
yeah, you're actually reminding me. There have been two periods in my life where I really just felt like everything felt a little bit out of control, and I would listen to the same song every morning on repeat as I got ready. And the first time that happened, the song was "7 Years" by Lucas
Oh
Graham,
yeah.
and the second time, it was "Closer" by the Chainsmokers. And but literally like on repeat. And so it's like even if you're not singing it, it's like having that song, that like go-to song that when you hear it reminds you like, oh, like here is where I am. I'm still here. I'm very present. There was some.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Oh no, go ahead.
I was going to say, and I would push you even further and say, don't just listen to it, but sing along, because that singing along is what's going to activate your brain. It's going to be that controlled breathing that actually keeps you calm. People don't give enough credence to how calming and how meditative and just how healing music can be when you're singing it. And I don't care if you can sing or you can't sing. Everybody can sing.
I love it. Yeah. I actually think I want you to do the intro. I want you to like sing the intro for my podcast, but we'll talk about that a little later. But yeah, I think for me, because I know you gave the tip of like having one single routine to get centered, and that can be your coffee or singing in the morning. And I think for me, these past couple of days, it's really been taking a shower, because I know it's easy if you're not trying to impress anybody to have that go by the wayside, like brushing my teeth, showering in the morning. And then I actually have been closing every single night with like a group Zoom call with a couple of friends that I had actually been loosely connected to. And we start out with like a 10-minute chat or whatever, and then move into a couple short 3 or 4 minute meditations, then do our 6-minute gratitude journaling, and then close with a longer 10-minute relaxation meditation. So I'll
perfect.
include the link if anyone wants to join. It happens at 7:30 Pacific time, PM, 10:30 Eastern time. But as someone, and I have actually never been a consistent meditation or journal person. But during times like this, and I guess this is really one of my survival strategies, is like now I'm pulling nothing that I had turned to for self-care before, right? But like taking on totally new behaviors that are actually keeping me quite grounded every single day.
Absolutely. And when you were saying earlier, when we first began, how, there's a hope that there's something bigger than this. What's the biggest lesson? Maybe this is the biggest lesson, that humanity as a whole find compassion for ourselves and others, that we connect in different ways, because what isn't working really isn't working. So maybe this is part of that. So I love that. I think this is the time to bring in new healing routines, bring in new healing relationships if possible, do things that you've never done before that keep your brain, focused on more positive things and keeps you very present and centered. I mean, these are all parts of my survival care that I would say, yes, I'm championing that for sure.
Beautiful. Yeah. Well, I actually think that's a wonderful place to close. If people want to follow you, where can they find you online?
They can follow my Instagram. It's Gina Moffa, LCSW, and you're going to caption that, correct? Okay. I also have a Facebook page. It's similar. It's Gina Moffa, LCSW. Reach out to me. I'd love to talk with you.
For sure. And thank you again for being my first guest. And I'm excited for this episode to go live.
I'm excited for your podcast, Tiffany. You're going to rock it out. And thank you for inspiring the masses all the time. Just thank you.
Oh my God. Thank you. My heart. Thanks, Gina. I'll talk to you
Okay,
later.
bye.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of Pioneers. I'm your host, Tiffany Yu. If you like what you heard, you can subscribe to this podcast, leave a rating or review, or feel free to shoot me a note across social media at I'm Tiffany Yu. That's the letter I, the letter M, and my first and last name.